Hey there, it's Steve from Serious Keto, and in this video, I'm going to show you that you only need 2 ingredients to form the foundation for an almost infinite variety of keto crackers. Now just to clarify, I'm not saying that this is a 2-ingredient cracker recipe. Actually, it could be, but it would be a pretty bland cracker. But hey, if that's your thing, you could totally do this with just 2 ingredients. For this video, I'm going to show you the recipe, the sort of foundation. I'm going to do probably a couple of different versions of the cracker, and I'm going to share some tips, tricks, techniques that I've learned along the way. But first, a little bit of background. One of my favorite cracker recipes is my flaxseed sesame cracker. I've been a big fan of this cracker for a long time, but I hadn't made it since having COVID, and I think perhaps COVID changed my sense of taste a little bit. I just can't deal with the taste of flax anymore. It has a very like fish oil taste to me now. So I wanted to remake these crackers without the flaxseed. And as I did, I started experimenting and realized just how versatile this particular recipe is. It's almost like the chaffle of crackers. You know, you think about it, a chaffle is 2 ingredients, is how it starts, mozzarella and egg, but then it's sort of infinitely customizable. And really, that's the case with this recipe as well. So I'm going to make probably 2 different versions of the cracker in this video, as well as share with you some of the experiments that I've done off camera. So let's get started making some crackers. The foundation for this recipe is 1 cup or 110 grams of almond flour and 1 large egg beaten. We're going to set the egg aside though and do our dry ingredients first. So our cup of almond flour, 3 tablespoons of sesame seeds. If you really want to amp up the flavor, use roasted sesame seeds. I'm just using plain sesame seeds here. 2 tablespoons of freshly grated Parmesan. Don't use the powdered stuff in the green can. If you're going to use Parmesan, grate it. 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt or pink Himalayan salt, your choice. Then for this batch of crackers, since I'm doing sort of a Parmesan, peppercorn, sesame, I'm going to grate some fresh black pepper. This is actually a pepper blend. If you have a pepper mill, you want to set it to a coarser grain. You can do that by turning this knob on top counterclockwise or anti-clockwise. I'm going to do 10 to 12 grinds. And 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. This is not for leavening. What this does is it changes the pH so the crackers brown a little bit better. Now this is not an instance where you need to sift your flour because, well, probably these sesame seeds wouldn't make it through the sieve anyway. So we're just going to give it a little mix with a spatula. Don't get overly concerned about any clumps of almond flour. Those are going to break up once we start to mix things. Then we'll add in our 1 large beaten egg and mix with a spatula. You'll hit a point fairly early on where you're going to think, I need to add more water, more egg, something like that. This is just, there's no way that this is all going to come together. Trust me, it will all come together. Though you may need to scrape off some of the stuff that adheres to the spatula so that that mixes back in. Just keep stirring, mashing, and occasionally sort of cutting into the dough, then mashing again. And look at that. It all comes together eventually like a nice, dense cookie dough of sorts. I'll place the dough onto a silicone mat, then I'm going to roughly shape this into a rectangle just so that I can roll it out a little bit more evenly. I'll lay down a sheet of parchment paper, then start rolling this out. I want to roll this out to about 10 inches by 14 inches, or if you're doing centimeters, that would be around 25 by 35. If you're not real concerned about creating perfect rectangles, a quick hack is to take half this batter, put it in a tortilla press, and press it between 2 pieces of parchment. But I kind of prefer the rectangles, which I didn't do a stellar job at rolling out here. So, tip number 1, offset spatula. Clean up the edges. kind of get this squared off. We'll take our extra bits and fill in around the edges where it's a little bit ragged. Or potentially a little bit too thin. Then I just use my fingertips to pat this down. Oftentimes I'll use the offset spatula on the edge to kind of create a little wall. Another little tip with this cracker dough, you want your eggs to be cold. When they're cold, that means the dough itself is going to be cold and it spreads a lot more easily with your fingertips without sticking to anything. All right, that's pretty close to rectangular. I'm going to give it one more roll with the parchment paper. Now this particular roll, I'm just trying to even it out, make sure that any of that additional dough that I spread around isn't in any big clumps. I'm not looking to make this any bigger than it is. So gentle roll. And I just give it one more little tap around the edges with my offset spatula. It's entirely okay if the edges are a little bit thicker. In fact, that's a good thing since it cooks from the outside in. This corner here, a little thin. This one is going to be kind of an extra crispy one. Then I use my offset spatula to score this into crackers. Oftentimes I get to this point and now it's executive decision time. Do I want the last ones to be 3 smaller crackers or 2 bigger crackers? I'm going to go for 2 bigger crackers. I then transfer this to a baking sheet and then into a preheated 350 degrees oven. That would be about 175 Celsius. We'll let this cook for 30 minutes. We are going to rotate it though at the 15-minute mark just to counter any potential hot or cold spots in the oven. All right, it's been half an hour. There's our crackers. We're going to let these sit for about 10 minutes before we transfer them to the cooling rack. Now I'm going to transfer this over to a wire rack, breaking it into individual crackers as I go. Okay, let's give it a try. Very good. I will say that these probably went about 5 minutes too long. My advice is once you hit about that 20 to 25 minute mark, start checking on your crackers. A lot can have to do also with your add-ins and potentially using different flours, which I'll talk about next. So let's talk about making these crackers your own. First off, if you want to do a substitution on flour, I would largely recommend that you stick with nut flours. Something like coconut flour is just way too liquid absorbent and it's not going to work out well. Even with the various nut flours, you will find that there's different degrees of liquid absorbency, and this is going to result in different thicknesses and crunchinesses of your cracker. Crunchinesses, I don't know if that's a word. So maybe you've got hazelnut flour or pecan flour. Maybe you want to use lupini flour. I actually did a batch using peanut flour. One recommendation I would make, at least on your first batch, do a 50-50 split between almond flour and whatever nut flour you're going to use. The reason for this is because almond flour is a little bit more neutral than all the other nut flours. That way you don't get too overpowering of a taste on your first batch. You can always up it at a later date. Now I did a batch with peanut flour, so 50% peanut flour, 50% almond flour. And here is the resulting chip. As for taste, so really that was kind of like a denser than a graham cracker, sort of graham cracker. It had the peanut butter flavor without the sweetness. I think if I were making a savory cracker, I might look at maybe seeing if I could find some sriracha salt or maybe just using some sriracha sauce in this to create some sort of a Thai peanut sort of a cracker. Or if I were going sweet, maybe I would add a little bit of like brown swerve to it and perhaps some cacao nibs. In terms of other add-ins, I had mentioned that you could go with roasted sesame seeds. If you want more color, you could throw in some black sesame seeds. I think one of the next batches I'm going to use some of these wasabi sesame seeds. And when it comes to seeds or cheese, usually I shoot for around 2 to 3 tablespoons of whatever ingredient I'm going to use. So 2 to 3 tablespoons of sesame seeds, 2 to 3 tablespoons of fresh grated Parmesan. I wouldn't go over that because then I think you do run the risk of that dough not coming all together. If you're going to use seasonings, herbs, spices, or mixes, my recommendation is to start with 1 teaspoon. Very often, a little of these go a long, long way. An example is something like everything but the bagel seasoning. If you go much over a teaspoon, teaspoon and a half, it gets really, really overpowering with the garlic. If you're going to use seasoning blends, I do encourage you to take a look at the ingredients. Some of them can get a little bit sketchy from a keto standpoint. I like the stuff from Flavor God. Pretty clean. There is a little bit of added sugar in some of them, so maybe you want to go with some ranch crackers or maybe some bacon flavored crackers. Another amazing seasoning for these crackers that I've used is dukkha. This is an Egyptian seasoning. It's got sesame in it. What else does it got? Let me just give it a little taste. It's got sesame, it's got cumin, it's got coriander. Not sure what else I'm picking up, but this you can actually go a little bit heavier with than traditional spices. You could probably go 2 teaspoons pretty easily with this, just because it's not super duper overpowering. But what I'm going to use for the second batch is some of this Trader Joe's vegan chickenless seasoning. You could probably use a powdered chicken bouillon. Lots of times that has maltodextrin in it, so not completely keto. We're not using all that much though, so I don't think it'll make a difference. We're probably going to use about a teaspoon. So let's make this batch of crackers. Once again, we start with 1 cup of almond flour, 1 teaspoon of our chicken seasoning, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. Give it a mix, breaking up those bigger chunks of almond flour, and our 1 large egg, beaten. Mix together, transfer to our silicone mat, square it off a little bit, roll it out, and now I've got it squared off and scored. I will say that this dough was a little bit more moist. It was a little bit more difficult to work with because it was a little bit more sticky. Onto our baking sheet and into the oven. And now the taste test of that Trader Joe's chickenless spice stuff. It's good, but not great. The thing is though with crackers, good is good enough because you're going to be dipping it in something or topping them with cheese. That's what I love about this recipe. Even my biggest failures have been edible. Now in terms of the Trader Joe's, if you decide to go that route, I don't know that I would increase the seasoning on it just because it is a little bit salty there at the end. I think perhaps using some powdered chicken bouillon, that may be the way to go if you're trying to sort of emulate a chicken in the biscuit cracker. So with me here, I have my completely unbiased taste tester. What's your name?
Colton?
Colton, that's right. Would you like to try one of Grandpa's crackers?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
What is it?
Good.
It's good? Okay.
Okay.
It's crunchy. Maybe I shouldn't have given you a full cracker there. That's a lot to chew, isn't it?
What?
You want a little bit of water?
Yeah.
Okay. So what did you think? Was it good?
It's good.
Was it tasty?
It's tasty.
Am I just repeating, Grandpa?
Grandpa?
Okay. But you liked it, right?
Okay.
Okay, good. So there you go. Take this recipe, have fun with it, make it your own, experiment. There's not much that can go wrong. In terms of the printable recipe, I will include a link to the original flaxseed and sesame seed cracker recipe. Honestly, the macros aren't going to change a whole lot depending on whatever you put in it, and the methodology is essentially the same. So just take that recipe and tweak it to your heart's content. If you find that you've come up with what you think is the new best ever keto cracker, please let me know. Let me know how you did it. Put it down in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please click that like button. If you're not a subscriber already, tap that subscribe button, then hit the bell to turn on all notifications. Lastly, if you'd like to help out the Serious Keto Test Kitchen and see some of the perks that you get like advanced videos, click that join button and see what memberships are all about. Thanks for watching.